My name is Naveen Somani, and this is my first speech for the Team USA debate application. I will be taking side proposition. There's an old saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. But what happens when that hand is the only one left to feed you? When that same hand begins to dictate your trade, your security, and your economy, that hand stops being assistance, it becomes dependence. And for developing countries, dependence is their greatest vulnerability. Because no country should be forced to place its future in the hands of a single entity and live under the mercy of an unchecked power, I'm incredibly proud to propose the motion. This House believes that an international system with two or more superpowers is better for developing countries than an international system with a single superpower. In this speech, I'll first begin with a few notes on framing, how to set up this debate, then transition into two substantive arguments for the proposition. So let's start off on the framing, where there are two important takeaways. First, while the opposition may point to examples of malicious superpowers, note that is not what this resolution and motion is asking us to debate. Leaders will change in and out, and we must debate the actual international structures of superpowers, not just the leaders who control them. But second, and most importantly, this motion is a This House Believes motion. Thus, our burden is competitive. We don't need to prove that multipolar systems are perfect or never have flaws, just that developing countries are better under a multipolar system than a world with one huge superpower dominating the globe. With that in mind, our first substantive argument is bargaining power. The thesis of this argument is simple. Competition among superpowers gives developing countries the autonomy and power to choose their best interests. 3 layers of analysis here. Firstly, on why developing countries become dependent in a unipolar world. In this world, there is only one provider of security, investment, diplomacy, assistance, etc. This means that developing countries have an unequal and unbalanced relationship, always receiving the short end of the stick. If the superpower poses conditions, developing countries must adhere or be sanctioned at the hands of that country. If they demand military cooperation, they must comply. If they demand political cooperation, they must comply. Developing countries are at the mercies of superpowers. In fact, before World War II, from around 1890 to 1920, and before the Soviet Union became powerful, when the US was the global hegemon, many Latin American countries existed almost entirely within the US's sphere of influence. Governments that relied on US aid, trade, and security had little ability to resist American influence and demands because they had no other partner to turn to. Thus, why these countries were plagued with continued poverty, corruption, and instability, and could never improve their situations because they became dependent on one power. So when the opposition tells you that these inherent struggles are ingrained in developing countries, note that these issues stem from the fact that these countries have one superpower and nowhere else to turn to. But the second layer of analysis is on why a world with two superpowers will create leverage and opportunity for developing countries. Because when countries have other options to turn to, they are no longer subject to control and interference. They gain alternatives. Instead of being forced to accept whatever terms one power imposes, they can choose and leverage competing partners. They are no longer just pawns in a global chess game. They have the market to be appeased to and are able to be treated with the respect they deserve. This was demonstrated perfectly in a newborn India during the Cold War. During the multipolar competition between the US and USSR, instead of being forced to choose one power, India leveraged both countries' dominating aspirations to stabilize their newborn country. India received Soviet military equipment and support while simultaneously maintaining economic trade and connection with the US. Instead of having to rely solely on one power, having both options available greatly helped the developing country of India reap both the benefits of parties and awards. But the third and final layer of analysis is on why this competition benefits not only developing countries, but the rest of the world. This has a global spillover effect, where now, superpowers seek to develop new tech and innovate to a greater extent to win out the market of these developing countries, which in turn helps the entire world develop and attain new resources. For example, again during the Cold War, during the famous space race between the US and USSR, as they competed for global prestige and influence over developing countries, their competition accelerated innovations such as GBS, satellite communications, weather forecasting, and numerous other advances in tech that were used for decades. Developing countries, already at a natural disadvantage, need something to even the playing field, and only is leverage, something that can only exist when there are alternatives. The second substantive argument is constrainment and checkback. Again, the thesis is simple. In a world with two superpowers, they constrain each other and check back to prevent one from solely conquering or imperializing. Throughout history, when one entity becomes stronger than everyone around it, it doesn't just coexist peacefully with the rest of the world. It expands. From the Ottoman Empire to Roman Empire, dominant powers continuously extend their influence and power over smaller nations because there is no one to stop them. Smaller states are never given a choice. They either submit to the dominant nation or become imperialized with no one to help them. But once another major power exists, all of these actions become constrained because every decision must account for the response from the other power. Superpowers can't just impose their order on the rest of the world when there are others to fight back against their domination. Once the USSR developed nuclear weapons following World War II, the international system completely changed. Neither side could dominate the globe because the other possessed the ability to push back against them. This is demonstrated clearly when the USSR attempted to pressure West Berlin with a blockade to invade and conquer that city. But the US, being the competing superpower, responded with the Berlin airlift, shipping in supplies to keep them going and fight back against the Soviet conquering. During these times of conflict, when one superpower is always pushing, we need multipolarity to make sure there is always someone pushing back against them. But the third and final point is about the impact. Now, the obvious clear impact is that weaker countries gain protection, but this is especially important and relevant in the nuclear age we are living in, because of mutually assured destruction theory. Since the dawn of nuclear weapons, we've needed two superpowers to keep in check and prevent one from imposing its order on the rest of the world. This overall keeps the world safer and keeps both powers in check from each other. And this is exactly what we observed during the Cold War. Although the opposition will likely tell you that the US and Soviet Union engaged in proxy conflicts, and the opposition will bring this up in their next speech, they never fought a direct conventional war against each other because the cost of escalation became unacceptable. The biggest war between the two largest nations was kept at bay because they had two superpowers canceling each other out and keeping each other in check. Ultimately, the opposition asks developing countries to trust that one dominant power will always act responsibly. And when we've seen that time and time again throughout history, a sole hegemon only seeks to dominate, we stand proud on side proposition to make sure that there are always checkbacks to keep the world more stable, help developing countries, and overall make the world a safer place. Very proud to propose.